Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jack. Back again to talk about the toxic healer meta of the Eternal Palace. Maybe the other side of the Eternal Palace that we haven't really seen, and or really talked about enough, I guess you could say. As the Race to World First is kind of wrapped up, we've gotten a little bit wrapped up in our conversations of how good is the tier, what do we like about it, what do we not like about it. And when we started asking people, and when I got to ask people at the Race to World First in London, I talked to a lot of DPS players, especially. And it was only until I got a chance off camera, unofficially or whatever, to talk to some of the healers about what was going on, about what made things so bad or good as well for the healer meta. And I kind of wanted to share that with you guys and also just give my own thoughts as well. Eternal Palace has been dominated by under-healing fights whenever possible. And very little utilization of 5 healers, except for maybe encounters closer to like Queen's Court or Gazoa. Actually, probably not Queen's Court, because that fight had a very tight rage timer, much tighter than many people would have expected just through testing, right? But we've had a lot of these encounters after we killed the first 3, where the DPS timers are really tight, where it's very important to be min-maxing the damage as much as possible. And for many healers, they thought, hey, it's a good thing that we have to deal damage, but it's also a bad thing that so few healers are actually able to deal good damage. And really, that just led to people seeing double disc for everything. And a couple people called it really early about, we're running double disc for everything. And not only is it a passive damage increase, I mean, one of the things that stands out is that disc and Holy Paladin especially are just able to dish out tremendous amounts of damage whenever they like, or passively just do a lot of damage baseline. But the other side of it is also the nature of the damage that we've encountered. So as we're looking at the damage that comes out onto it, yeah, we've had some dot damage, some trickle damage that goes out onto the group, some steady damage. Look at like Ashvane or Gazoa, you kind of get overwhelmed over time with how many dots are out onto the raid, how much damage there is on everybody. But more importantly, the damage in the most encounters, especially as you get deeper into the encounters, it's very bursty. The encounters are tremendously bursty and put a massive emphasis on damage reduction cooldowns because you're not quite able to heal up all that damage, right? And many times you're getting knocked down 50-60% per damage event that comes out. Queen's Court in particular, having deferred sentences taking off 30-40% of your HP, and then another 50-something% HP coming out from any of the potent sparks that get detonated. So you have this combination that comes together, and you have to watch out really closely for it to make sure you have enough health, enough personal defensive cooldowns up to be able to survive these mechanics. And if you don't, then you instantly die. And the reason for why this is something that they've been trying to put a damper on for a very long time. And it surprises me that they didn't really put more of a cap on healer power creep. Now, the idea of this is a healer's ability to be able to top off a health pool from 10 to 100% and how quickly it takes. Historically, it's very hard to top off a health pool at the beginning of an expansion, and that's something we expect. But throughout expansions, they try to make sure they continuously raise the level of stamina to be able to compensate for this effort, right? So, as a result, we saw, for example, in Battle for Dazar'alor, where all the stamina that you got from Azerite received a 40% bonus. So you got massive stamina increase by getting new Azerite pieces, and they had additional traits on them, right? They also, greater scaling of Azerite traits in general means that, an Azerite piece that gives you plus 300 intellect at a 415 level, it was going to be lower than that. It's going to be lower than that level at a lower item level, right? So when you take that to defensives, your defensive traits are also going to be getting stronger. But when it comes to the damage that comes out in the raid environment, Eternal Palace has just had massive bursts of damage that are just wiping people out left and right, and making it so important to make sure you're staying on top of how much damage you take and when you're going to be able to use your defensives more than ever. You saw the bursts of damage that come out from Dread in particular, right? It shows that some of these fights are going to be killable much more easily for people later down the line when they have the 65 minor essence, or they have greater item level from being able to have higher neck level, so they're getting the plus 5 eye level, additional stamina from higher eye level Azerite gear. But that's something that a lot of World First Raiders didn't have. And while it's common for them to have less gear and less resources, it's something that they've done a pretty good job of this expansion, trying to put a damper on until this point. Not increasing stamina levels by a significant enough margin from new Azerite pieces or from the Heart of Azeroth, because keep in mind, not only do you gain stamina when your Heart of Azeroth neck level increases, but you also have the stamina nodes that connect minor traits and minor essences together. So you're getting additional stamina, but it's not enough to be able to deal with the incoming damage that we're seeing in the new raid. So those things together, very high damage requirements for the healers to be able to contribute, and high burst damage have contributed to making Discipline this master of all that a raid will throw at it. If anything, it was just a perfect storm. You're able to stack up on encounters. So barrier is insane. You're much more likely to be able to get ticked down very quickly, or in the case of Ashara, one shot. So absorption effects, insane. The burst damage that goes out into the group is very heavy, a specialty of Discipline Priest, and damage requirements are incredibly high, so you have to take advantage of the passive damage. There's no drawback to it. In fact, when you have other healers that have consistently kind of lost their niches or never really had one to begin with, in the case of Holy Priest, or low niche in terms of mobility for Druid, or, you know, maybe big single target for a Monk, right? Those little things, they just didn't translate into this raid at all. And even though those healers can be fun and enjoyable to play for many, no matter what, the meta trickles down. Everyone's going to see what the top raiders are doing and then try to copy it. And that's just always how it's been forever for any game whatsoever. So to me, it seems like there was a lack of proper preparation for that incoming damage, the knowledge of that incoming, and how to be able to take appropriate steps and measures as a result. But in a more general sense, now that we know that the problems are, is it more of a raid problem or is it a class problem, right? You say, okay, well, the raid didn't really suit the rest of the classes and how they are. It's fair, but the other side of it is, don't you think Eternal Palace represents what a raid should end up being? Don't you think that it's a good feeling that having every little scrap of damage in a hardcore raiding guild is going to be required? And if you're not a hardcore raiding guild, well, in time, another round of big power-ups are going to come along, additional gear is going to come along, and those things will help you run over those bosses, and they'll feel more normal to you. To me, I very much like the idea of it, but when you're in a situation where monks, holy priest, resto druid, they don't have the passive damage that they're going to be able to, that the other ones do. They don't have the passive damage of Disca Holy Paladin. Shaman, for example, has to pay a big price. Shaman has absolutely absurd single target damage, but you have to spend so much activity time DPSing in order to get it done that in many ways you kind of become a cooldown bot in taking good use of Spirit Link Totem. But in many cases, I think that's fair, right? That you're having to sacrifice your DPS sacrifice your HPS in order to deal very heavy damage. So going into the final raid of the tier, whatever that may be, that's one of the questions I think that the developers can always ask themselves is, how do they want this raid to look, and how is it going to be suited towards a certain meta, a specific meta that we're going to be looking at? Because I personally very much like the idea of having a healer meta that is built upon, hey, your damage is significant. That's one of the founding principles of Mythic Plus, right? Is your damage is significant and helps the group out in a very meaningful way. Having enrage timers tied to a couple million HP, so you're incentivized into taking damage dealing trinkets, it's great. But the other side of it is, and the other argument that I'm sure many people are kind of formulating in the comments already, is I'm a healer. I'm not built, I didn't sign up to do damage. And I understand that argument. And in many cases, I think that's finding the perfect kind of recipe in encounters where there's so much healing and there's little bits of downtime where you're encouraged to deal damage. So because there's constant healing, you'll be incentivized to keep up, your most important dot. So as a shaman, you're incentivized to keep your flame shock up and then use any procs for lava burst on a free global, right? And still dealing significant damage. But if there's any downtime, then you're making sure that you're having both your lava bursts on CD and then adding a couple lightning bolts here and there, right? Something along those lines. In the side of like Holy Priest being able to use Chastise on cooldown or Holy Fire on cooldown if you can, and then get some extra smites in if possible, right? I think in many cases that looks to be more of a similar or more of a desirable outcome. But then you have to balance it for so many different things, right? You have to be able to balance it for Mythic Plus to make sure that, oh, just because their passive damage, you know, if you're spending a lot of time as a shaman healing and you're just keeping Flame Shock up, should you be dealing as much damage as a paladin who's constantly in melee range, constantly Crusader striking, using Judgment, and those things also augment their healing, right? So in many cases we have a very well balanced raid and a very well tuned raid, but it has a very hard adverse effect on the rest of the healers, and it almost makes it. And for one of, I think this might be one of the first times that you've had so little healer representation in the tip-top meta. You're having like a druid here, a shaman there, but the variety is very poor, and the incentive to bring a variety of healers has been very low. That's one of the things that I think is very disturbing about this tier in general. Is while it feels great to be a Disc Priest, when you're looking at everybody else, you're saying, well, this is not that great for them, and the trickle-down effect starts continuing to show. And that's probably not healthy. I mean, we've seen it with Mythic Plus. Having the same healers be king of Mythic Plus for a long time is not a great thing. So let me know what you guys think on that one. I wanted to be able to get a quick video together because I know it's been a while, and I definitely wanted to be able to get back on board and, you know, start giving my thoughts on the raid now that it's been wrapped up. So let me know what you guys think. Thanks so much for tuning in. We are back in action for videos, and hopefully be able to post many more in the future. But until then, be sure to tune into the live stream linked in the description below, and be sure to check out my Discipline or Holy Priest guides, if we still have a couple left, for more tips and tricks for the Eternal Palace and all the other good stuff to follow. Thanks for watching, guys. I'm AutomaticJak, and catch you all next time.